Hello and welcome to the Love with Bipolar podcast. My name is Ana Ruiz and I am your host. Now, this podcast is a space to have the conversations about love and relationships while living with bipolar disorder. And everyone's welcome here, whether you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder or you have a loved one or are in a relationship with someone living with bipolar, or if you're just simply curious to learn more about these topics. So I'm very excited because this is our very first episode, and I thought I would share a little bit about my personal story. Now, I invite you to listen and see where you relate, because even though we're different people, most likely living in different cities, different countries, our stories have some similarities. So I invite you to listen in for those things where you might relate to. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 20 years ago. I was 32 years old at a time. And I initially first that the doctors had made a mistake, that there was something wrong in their diagnosis. And eventually it took me a couple months for the reality to sink in that, yeah, I had been diagnosed and that, yeah, I had experiences that match what the doctors call bipolar disorder. And when that reality sank in, is when I felt shame, because I felt that something was wrong with me. I felt that I was broken and I was defective. And I was terrified because I was afraid that I would never find a man who loved me because there was something wrong with me. And I was single at a time. I went through periods of dating people for maybe no more than 3 or 4 months. I went through periods of just not dating anyone at all. And it was when I was 38 years old that I had my first, like what I call long-term relationship. It's a relationship that went on and off for 4.5 years. And that relationship, one of the things that happened was that, well, first of all, my ex-partner had a really hard time with my diagnosis, with the behaviors that I demonstrated when I was having manic episodes. He would get really scared. It was hard for him to hold the space for me. And at the same time, I recognized that I was being reckless with my own mental health. And what I mean by that is I felt pressured to stop medication, thinking that medication was bad. I was doing activities, like I was doing a number of activities that were actually putting my own mental health at risk, without knowing. Like, for example, there were meditations in altered states that I was just really into doing that, not knowing that it was affecting my health, but then I continued doing it. So it was just a period of like my own exploration to see what are the boundaries of this disease. And of course, I was risking my own life in sometimes and my own stability, and that had a ripple effect into my relationship. So I know my ex-partner really loved me, really care about me, but it was hard for him to hold the space for me as I was doing those things. So eventually that relationship ended, and in a way I feel like I hit bottom, because I realized that I wanted a relationship and I just didn't know what to do. So that was a time when I was 42 and I started learning just learning about relationships because I didn't learn relationship skills or tools either at home or in school. I was afraid of conflict. I didn't know how to communicate my needs. And I also had a number of patterns from that I grew up with that I was bringing into my relationships, anywhere from codependency, people pleasing. I had a bunch of fears. So I did the work to shift all of that because I really wanted a long-term relationship. So I joined a group coaching program, and in that program, it was like putting a huge mirror into like my own patterns, like where I was afraid of communicating, where when people where I compare myself to other people, and where I observe people like forming little groups and not inviting me to their groups and feeling left out, just like when I was in elementary school. So it was very triggering and uncomfortable at the same time. And I'm really glad that I put myself through that because a couple of things happen. One is once I learn about my own patterns and I learn how to shift them and I learn skills and I learn tools, I realized I wanted to help other people with that. So I put myself into a track to become a relationship coach, and it's been one of my best decisions ever. And then at the same time, after had it been like a year and a half, so there was a period of time that went by, and then I was ready to start dating again. And I put myself out there, and that's when I met my current husband, Brett. So we've been together for 7 years, and our relationship was very different from any other relationship I had in the past, in the sense that when we went on our first date, I realized that there was a connection and that it had potential, and I didn't want to develop feelings. Um, and I didn't want him developing feelings without knowing about my diagnosis. And so it was our first date when I had the courage to share with him about my diagnosis and the things that I had been doing to be stable. And And he didn't run away. He actually, at the end of that date, he did some research. He read a little bit about it and just enough to come back to our second date and say, "Yeah, this is something that I can do." And then he did something that I am grateful for him, because he actually set a boundary with me where he said, "Yes, I want to be in this relationship with you, and I want you to do your part to be stable." And I like to me that was really important in our relationship since the beginning. And I'm not here like I'm just gonna take a pause and just see like if like about my story, like is this kind of like making sense, and can you see some parallels to your own story? And I'm not here to tell anyone what being stable means like or what they need to do. Um, I think that it is important that if you want a relationship, that you take a good look at yourself. If you have been living with bipolar disorder, or if you want a relationship with someone living with bipolar disorder, and have those boundaries, have those agreements. It's important if you want a relationship that lasts long term. I think it's one of several elements for me, for building a relationship that lasts a long term. So so after that we started a relationship, and I think it was a year into a relationship when I had a manic episode. I had to be hospitalized, and my husband Brett was very protective of me as I was going through that, very caring, just making sure that I was treated with dignity, that it's really hard to describe the feeling, but it was just this feeling of protecting me and caring for me and having the conversations with my manager. Like back then, I was working in software and making sure that they knew only what they really needed to know because there's a huge stigma out there. And then when I was discharged, he picked me up. He waited for me enough days to get back on my feet from being in the hospital for over a week, not sleeping very well, taking antipsychotic medications. And when I was finally back on my feet, he said to me, I want to have a conversation." And I remember that moment, and I was just like shaking. I was like, this is the time when he's gonna end our relationship. He's just gonna break up with me. This is too much because that's what my ex used to do, right? So I just like, okay, we had that conversation, and the first thing he says is, we need to have a plan for whenever this happens again. He's like, I was not able to, he's like, I had to find my way through getting into your phone to get your emergency contacts. Didn't know these things about you, the family dynamics with your family. And he said, yeah, so we need to have a plan. And I said, yeah, we'll work on we'll work on a plan together. I'll put everything together in writing. And then that was it. Like he didn't say anything else. And I was like, He's not breaking up with me." I was just kind of like in disbelief. Um, I took it really serious. We put together a plan. That plan over the years has changed. It's not just one plan, but it has like 3 or 4 different stages that are part of like building up to that plan. And that was really important for having a relationship with me and with the challenges that I had been having. So, and also for him to be able to support me and to be there for me. So, I think that if I kind of like take a step back, what I feel the most grateful is just how this relationship has been very healing for me, because the fact that he accepts me and supports me and loves me the way I am, with even like these episodes and hospitalizations and what I've been through, where it's been hard for me to love myself, and to have someone who loves me even more than how I love myself. It has been very healing. And that's why my commitment is, and my mission is to help people have um, that love in their life that is healing. And of course, it's not a one-way street. I know my husband Brett has had his own challenges, and I've been there to support him as much as I can. And that's one of the elements that is kind of like the glue in our relationship, that we have each other's back. So so this is a part of my story that I wanted to share with you. So I invite you to see where you see the similarities, where you would like to things to be different in your relationship. And you are welcome to leave me questions down below in the comments. Also, if you have, I invite you to share a takeaway or an insight that you got from listening. And I will see you in the next episode of Love with Bipolar by Ana Ruiz. Ciao, ciao.